Hi everybody, it's Miss Knutson, and I am here with you today to talk about another art history lesson. And not only are we going to learn about an artist and their work, but we're going to make our own version of their work and learn about their process. Consider how your neighborhood is magical. Consider what makes where you live and where you're from an amazing place where your imagination can take off. Today, we're going to talk about Faith Ringgold. Faith Ringgold was an author and advocate of people who were not regularly celebrated in the art world. She grew up in New York City. She was an art educator, and she was a fine artist. She came up with her own techniques of painting on fabric and incorporating quilt squares into her work. Not only was it practical, where she could just roll up her artwork because it was a quilt and take it wherever it needed to go, but also it expressed the importance of quilts in her culture as an African-American woman. It elevated a quilt from being something that was just for your bed to a piece of artwork that hung in galleries and museums. She also wrote these wonderful books for kids. And the one we're going to talk about today is called Tar Beach, where we get to meet Cassie and her brother BB and learn about their adventure over their apartment building. We're going to use Cassie and BB as our guides into an imagination journey over their apartment building where there was a tar beach. On the very top of their apartment building, it was covered in a black tar to keep the water from getting in through the roof to the apartments below. And it probably was really warm, much like a beach was, but they were able to get out of the noise of the city streets and go on top of the building and look over the city. It was quiet, the air was fresh, the sky was big, and Cassie, of course, loved the George Washington Bridge, and her imagination would soar, quite literally. Our lesson today, we are going to make our own storytelling quilt based on the Tar Beach story. I will show you what our project is going to look like. Ta-da! All right, so this is going to be our storytelling quilt. We're going to have a border with quilted squares of fabric around the outside, and then the middle of our storytelling quilt will show Cassie and BB soaring over their neighborhood, which included an amazing view of the George Washington Bridge. This will be so fun to put together. It does not have any very complicated art supplies, so you and your students, you will be able to achieve this very easily. First of all, I want to say that I've created a lesson to partner with this video that will have supplementary materials. So you can completely use this video and just go for it based on the instructions that I'll give you today. But if you want a little bit more support, a little bit more defined information, this will have a supply list and it will have a template of Cassie and BB that you can add to your project. This is a supplementary material. I'll have a link for it below if you want to grab it and have it for your process. It will definitely help. It will give you a little bit of history, summary of the book, supply list, and a template. So the supplies we will need for this lesson are, you will need a piece of watercolor paper. This one is 9 by 12. I recommend this size. You can go 8 by 10 if that's more practical for you. You will need a piece of poster board. It really doesn't matter what color. Mine was white. And you're going to cut it into about 2-inch strips. And this will create the frame that you will put your quilt squares on, or poster board scraps that will fit around your watercolor paper. You will need watercolor paints and brushes. You will be using it to cover your watercolor paper with a deep sky blue. Watercolor dries pretty quickly, so keep that in mind. You will need construction paper. I just got a pack of assorted, construction paper to make the buildings of the skyline of New York City. You will need fabric scraps. fabric scraps. I did purchase some solid colors to kind of break up all the patterns, but any fun patterns that you have will work. Have fun and find some fabric scraps to make your quilt border. You will need some glue. White glue, liquid glue is recommended for gluing down the quilt squares. You will have a brush for the watercolor paint, and you can use that same brush for your glue. If it works out, just make sure you rinse it in between. Scissors to cut your fabric scraps and your construction paper. And you will also need a ruler if you want to make your border very straight, and also to help with constructing the George Washington Bridge. You will need tape to tape your finished watercolor deep blue sky to your quilt frame. For the George Washington Bridge in the finished storytelling quilt, I used a gray Posca paint pen. But really any marker will do. Sharpie, Crayola will probably do just fine once your watercolor background is dry, bone dry. I have in the supplementary materials a template of Cassie and BB. Ta-da! If you get the supplementary materials, this will be available to you. You'll see in the lesson that we colored them with colored pencils and cut them out. I just encourage you to color your characters with bright colors. I left a border around the edge and I colored it with a blue colored pencil that was as close to my background color as possible. I used colored pencils and it worked great. Those are the supplies for this lesson. Now let's go through the steps constructing this amazing storytelling quilt with the emphasis of Faith Ringgold's style and her story of Tar Beach. First, we're going to take our 9x12 watercolor paper and cover it with a deep sky blue. I mixed two different colors and covered the whole thing. You'll set it off to the side and let it dry. While your watercolor is drying, take your poster board, glue it together to make a frame, and get it ready to glue on all your fabric samples and shapes that you have cut out. Cover your entire frame of poster board with your fabric scraps in an alternating pattern that pleases you. Once you've covered your entire poster board frame, take your scissors and trim the edges to make it nice and tidy. Also want to trim the inside. Take care in doing this, but the results are really nice to have both the outside and inside trimmed. Next, take your Cassie and BB template, print it out, and color Cassie and BB in bright colors. I used colored pencils and they worked really well. To get the skin tones just right, I used different colors of brown. And once I was done with both of them, I colored the outside border a blue that matched the deep blue sky. Next, grab your ruler and a pencil, and we're going to draw the George Washington Bridge. I drew a line that was about 6 inches long on either side and connected them. Then I measured about 2 inches down and made a mark that was a good orientation spot to draw an arch to create that bridge shape. I drew the supporting cord lines all the way across the composition, and I added some other lines to make it look more like a bridge. I didn't try super hard to make it look like this is a bridge that would exist in real life. I just wanted it to look like a symbolic bridge. Next, I took my gray paint pen and I created all kinds of unique patterns and lines to make this bridge look like it was made of metal. Next, I took a light paint pen and I drew all the lights that made the George Washington Bridge look absolutely magical. I also had some other light, bright colors that I used to accentuate the white lights and make it look really sparkly. Take your scissors and cut your construction paper into all kinds of great rectangle shapes. Next, I drew windows on my rectangles so they would look like city buildings. Once you have done all of the windows on your buildings, you're ready to glue them down. Take your white glue and a paintbrush and paint the backs of all your rectangular shapes and layer those city buildings on the bottom of your page. Once you've layered all of your buildings on the bottom of the page, use that same paintbrush and glue Cassie and BB in your deep blue sky above the George Washington Bridge, flying high. The last thing we'll do is you will take some tape and flip it upside down and tape the composition into the frame. All right, guys, I hope you had such a fun time making your Tar Beach storytelling quilt today. I so loved making this lesson. It is so satisfying. Whether you choose to be literal and put Cassie and BB in their imaginary space, soaring over the George Washington Bridge, or whether you choose to put yourself above the bridge or yourself in your own imagined amazing space. Perhaps you live in the mountains. Maybe you live by the ocean. Maybe you live over cornfields. What would it look like if you were to soar just like Cassie over your neighborhood? If you really loved this lesson, make sure you click like and subscribe to this channel. I will have materials that you can use at home for yourself, for your kids, for your students in the classroom. I love joining you today. Thank you for coming and exploring Faith Ringgold's Tar Beach and making your own storytelling quilt. Check out the description below for the supply list and the supplemental materials, and I will see you next time.